Yeah, dear students, very good morning to all. Recording started. Okay. At least one person responded. Okay. Fine. So in the last session, we have just discussed about your servlet interface and generic servlet and HTTP session servlet. So what these are three are called? These three are called the types of servlets what we had. So after that, just we seen the difference between what is a servlet config and what is the difference between servlet context. So with example program, we have discussed in my last session. And coming to my servlet context and config, one related to with a single independent application of servlet, and one is related with your whole web application. So this is, I think, what we covered in my last session. So for today's session, so we are going to focusing on the attribute. So how we are going to make your attribute in your servlet. But before going to this, how the allocation can be done, first let me know what is meaning of attribute. So attribute is nothing but it is a one of the object. Like if you take your Java programming, generally Java programming, if you want to move or if you want to take one object you created for one application, example, just assume that object, when you want to reuse once again with another application, at that time what you are going to do, sharing of the objects can be done between application to application, and this sharing of this information can be done with the help of an object called attribute, right? So I think you got some idea what is an attribute. So basically what is an attribute in my servlet? In my servlet, attribute is an object, right? It is an object which can be used to make sharing of or passing of information of one servlet to another servlet using that attribute information. And to make this information sharing among your servlets, we prefer to use totally 4 methods. Like to make your attribute setup, we are going to use set attribute. Whatever the attributes you want to use in another servlet, to get that attributes, we are going to use a method called get attribute method. Sometimes we don't need to use the attributes. So at that time we want to remove it. So we can remove that attributes. And along with these 3 methods, we are going to discuss one more method is, if suppose you have described from some of the parameters in your deployment descriptor in the form of enumeration. So to get back all these enumeration parameters, here we are going to use the 4th method called public void enumeration get into parameters. So what I just made it is, these are my 4 applications, 4 methods you are using over here to make your attribute setup. But when you make these 4 methods, first of all, we should get a clarity that these can be applicable in these following scopes. Where we can apply, one is a request scope. At the time of request scope, we can do it our attribute setup. And at the time of session scope, we can make a setup to your attribute. And third is what? At the time of your application scope, we try to make your attribute setup. So what is a basically attribute? I'm reminding you, attribute is what? An object. Like how you are doing in Java programming, sharing of one object information with another object, or I can say simply reusability. I can say reusability is called accessing of one object with another application. The same thing we are doing, but that is done in your application called Java, and here we are doing with an application called servlet. That is what the difference we can find out. And as I told, there are 4 methods. What is my first method is set attribute, and whatever the attributes you are going to set up, that attribute name you are going to mention, and you are going to give that object of that attribute, because basically we need to set up an object only, because object is accessing data can be done with your object only. So this can be made set the given object, and once whatever the object you have made a setup here, you want to get that attributes information, that is going to be written with object only, because finally object is an important aspect. Instead of taking return void, what it is going to return here, object can be written back with a specified name what you are going to use as your attribute. And I told already one more thing additionally, to make to get what are the parameters you are initialized and its names as a group, as a group. So we can make it as what, enumeration data type of your return type, and get it into parameters name as your method name, and your access specifier is public, because anyone can able to access the things we had it. And once you have set, once you have get, sometimes we need to remove that attributes. So for this purpose, I'm going to make a use of what, remove attribute method. So this is 4 methods where we generally prefer to use to make of your attribute object, right? So, but how we are making this attribute object in your servlet, just we'll try to go with an example program. So when you just make it an example program of your attributes, just make it here two. I had a 2 servlets with me. One servlet is known as servlet context attribute 1. It is my servlet 1, right? So this is the packages which you need to install. So some of the packages are missing in your, just check it out, what are the packages you are missing later. So if your packages are missing, that means your package is not supporting, means some of the jar files are missing, .jar files. So these packages are imported once you are trying to create your servlet. And what is your class name or servlet name here? Servlet context att1. So I made it already as a top, and it is extending our basic interface as you call HTTP servlet. And it is using what method? Do get method. You know what is a do get? It shows the content of information over your URL bar. And this do get method will take request and it responses using which protocol called HTTP. Then we are going to make a use of try catch block always, because the reason is if any type of exceptions has been raised, that exceptions can be caught by your catch block, right? So then you are going to make the use of your content type. So as I told in the last session, to get your content, what type of content you are using. So to get your content back, once again a method called a content type. So you are going to set up first content type what you had. Either it can be set in your text or HTML file. As mainly we go forward HTML file. Then you want to get the output as using a method called a print writer. To get that method, you are going to use a method called get writer with the help of your response object. Once again RES. So where is an important for is here, this is what we are doing. So what we are doing in this example, just have a look. A context dot set attribute I am doing. So first method number 1 I applied here. What is the method number 1? I am trying to make some attributes setup. What is an attributes? I am making a setup as with a string name. Website name is my one attribute, and w3adda.com is one more attribute I made a setup. And then what I'm just making the message as welcome to so and so, I made it here. This is its first servlet where I'm using my method number 1 with a set attribute. Then I am going to close my method. Right. This is your servlet 1. Now this attribute, whatever you used in your servlet 1, this attribute I'm getting in another servlet, or using this attribute in another servlet using a method called a get attribute. How we are using is, just come back to your second. This is your second servlet which you created. So when you try to create your servlet, so everything is same, only here you can find the difference. What is that? You are going to make what? Servlet context. Context is equal to what? Get servlet context. This is the information you are getting. If you find the below line, once you got a context of your servlet, that is a whole web application information you got it, then you are going to use a method called get attribute method. get attribute, and here this attribute is also be written in the form of what? String only. So string n is equivalent to, so your type conversion is also be a string, and context dot instead of set you are getting attribute. Means previously what attribute I used in my servlet 1, that attribute I'm going to deploy in your second attribute, or reusing the same attribute in the second method by using a method called get attribute method. And what you are trying to access here, what is the website name? What is the website name here? w3adda.com is my website name. So that I'm using here, I'm getting here that attribute value. So then if you try to run this servlet 1 and servlet 2, or just try to compile your program, so it is going to get a message as welcome to our website, and the name of your website will be displayed. So like this, as where we are setting one attribute, and here we are using attribute output in the second servlet. So if you try to make this program, so sample output I will try to share with you. Just look at here. So same thing what I just explained to you, the same thing I made it in the presentation also. So I think it is not yet saved. Maybe. So your output will be look like what? It comes output as first output will be displayed as welcome, website name it will come, and second the same attributes you are going to be utilized in your second. So if you see the first output out dot welcome.w3adda, it will print as the first output. And when you make this second attributes, so it is going to be make as what? Welcome to our website w3adda.com. So what I'm just making, I'm not anywhere mentioned your website name here, but that attribute is retrieved, or that attribute is getting from your first servlet. So this is what you call as attribute setup. Get, set, as we have done. So if you want to remove, simply we can add the below one line. No need to mention what is the attributes you are making. Just simply we can use a method called what? Context dot remove attribute you can use. No need to go for any type of methods which you had. So remove attribute, if you call automatically whatever the attributes is there, that can be removed. If you want to specifically remove any attribute, you can just mention that as with a string name. If I want to remove this attribute called website name, you can just make it like this, so that this attribute can be removed from your servlet. So set, get, remove. This is what the three things which we are using in your servlet to make use of, or to make your attributes as an object. So 4 methods and 1 example. This is one simple concept what we had it. And coming into next concept, this is a very important, I can say. And one more thing is, this concept is also included for your lab exercise, right? But before going to that, first we need to let you know what do you mean by request dispatcher. You know what is meaning of dispatching? Dispatching is nothing but passing some or giving some information one to another is called dispatch, or delivering a one product from one place to another place is called as what? Dispatch. So similarly, here we need to dispatch. What we need to dispatch here? A request we need to dispatch. I told already, when a client make a request, that can be done in the form of a request and response format using a protocol HTTP, right? So when you try to make a dispatch of your request, what is actually request dispatcher? It is one of my interface. It is what? It's my one of interface where it provides a facility to dispatching one request to another resource. So suppose you made a one request, example. So client can make 100 requests, but among 100 requests, one request you are dispatching from one resource to another resource. And what will be the resources here? Resources can be maybe another servlet, maybe another HTML file, maybe your server JavaScript file. Anything can be done, but you are trying to dispatching your request from one resource to another resource. It is known as request dispatcher. This is what a basic definition. So if I want to make the usage of this request dispatcher, I need to use, as usual, once again, some of the methods. But before going to this method, just I'll come back once again And this request dispatcher, once again I forgot to give, this request dispatcher is using two methods in the dispatching process. One is include method, one is forward method. So what is the include method and what is the forward method means? Suppose I had one servlet program with me and you try to make a run of that particular servlet. Automatically, when you make a execution of the servlet, what you are going to generate? You are going to generate a response. It's nothing but output will be generated. That output not displaying there and trying to forward to the next servlet, which is nothing but servlet 2 want to access. Just I'll go with the diagram. So this is what I can say my forward method. As you just make it as a client, what is making here? Is making a request for which one? For making one servlet 1 which you already designed, and once the request is done from your client side, you are going to just generate one response, but that response is not way interlinked with your servlet 2. Simply is getting a message called as what? What method is using here? Forward method. Means servlet 1 is forwarded to servlet 2. Then what the servlet 2 is doing? 1 second, servlet 2 should generate some response to the request which is coming from servlet 1. So it has been generated response, and that final response is given back to whom? To the client. So here any response is loaded, servlet 1 response is loaded anywhere here? No. Just it's giving, passing a resource information of your servlet 1 to servlet 2. That's it. There is no response is recorded here of your servlet 1. But whereas if you take your include, you can just make it somewhat the thing in opposite reverse manner. What happens in your method called include? First, as usual, a client make a request. It goes to your servlet 1, and what the servlet 1 do? It's going to be including its own methods, or servlet 1 is giving its resource information to whom it is going to give? To the servlet 2. And servlet 2 is going to be generating a response, and that response is get back 1 second to my servlet 1. So finally, the response of your servlet 1 and the response of servlet 2 is going to be recorded as a final response, and that has been given to whom? To your client. So previously what happened? Servlet 1 response is not loaded, but in your include method, servlet 1 response as well as servlet 2 response is loaded as one final response, and that responses are going to be forwarded to your client. This is what I can say include method. Hope you understand the difference between your include and forward. So if you see this include and forward methods, as I told, it's going to be used, as I told, forwards a request from servlet to another resource. That's it. A resource may be any type I told already, to where you are sending that one onto your server for execution. So similarly, it is also going to be sent. It's what? It includes the content of resource. Remind, it includes the content of resource of your servlet, or maybe JSP, or maybe HTML in the response, so that it can get back your final response. So this is the main difference between your include method as well as your forward method, and this mechanism is known as what? Request dispatcher mechanism. Now come to my example program. If you take, this is my request dispatcher. So as usual, you know what this is a folder or what the directories is containing. So it contains your configuration files. Yesterday we have discussed something about your configuration files, context and config. So whole application and single application. So it contains how many servlets? Just look at here description. So it contains totally 2 servlets. Simple.java is a servlet 1, and welcome servlet is my servlet 2. Now the same thing I'm giving a description here about what this is going to be contained. And simple, actually I need to mention here alias name. You can just, if you want, you can replace default, it will come as original name of your Java. So I need to change your alias name as XYZ, and your class name is simple. And what is your second class name? It's a welcome servlet. I can make 1 second as an alias name. Then I can make it as what? The URL or class name, I can make it here. Then URL address you can find in this case. So first, servlet, if you try to compile it, the URL will go to /go, and second, you are going to make your URL pattern as what? Welcome. And what is your welcome file initially? Login.html. So what the login.html will create? It creates some username and password for you. If you try to enter your username and password properly, it's going to click a submit button so that it can be redirected to your simple.java. It depends upon your include or forward. It goes to your welcome servlet. And your web XML file, once again containing the same description what I told, configuration file as well as your description file. Now, if you try to open your first file, simple.java, what it contains, just make it a simple.java. Here, what we need to learn, that only just I will try to highlight in this point, because every time it gives same concept. So it is everything known to you up to this one, up to these two lines. It's a common what we generated. Now here you're getting string p is equivalent to request dot get parameter. So you are going to get a parameter of your user pass, and what is the password you are giving for here is the servlet. So your user request is matched with your servlet. Then you are using a method called a request dispatcher, and what is the object of it? RD, and request dot get dispatcher. I'm getting request dispatcher, and what is that? I'm going to print a message, welcome, and that has been forwarded. Remember, here I'm using a method called forward method. So once my username and password, both which we entered, is right, then it can be forwarded by carrying the same request and same response that can be forwarded to one more servlet. What is that one more servlet? Is called welcome servlet.java. It is going to be redirected or dispatched. If suppose whatever the user ID and password you have entered wrong, then it is giving a message that something you have done wrong. So I am going to make dispatching 1 second to where we are going to dispatch, or we are going back which page. 1 second, it is redirecting to your login.html, and in this case I am including my request and response. So two methods I'm parallelly using here, and one method is going for forward if everything is well. If nothing is anything goes wrong, it goes to my method called include method. And second servlet, what is the second servlet? Just it's want to print a welcome message, welcome my user, or welcome username. It's going to print your second servlet. Now I'm going to make how my two things will work out. Include method I will show, forward method I will show with an execution. So if you try to compile, just it's going to make a build and success, and you try to run, check it out. So it need to open, I think Glassfish server is already started. So it need to go for redirection to your my web page. So open, it's not yet opened. So it is giving some message as build failed, where the build has been failed. We'll just make it build is successful. Okay, right? So I made it run. See the server log file, build failed. So Glassfish server deploy null. So it's giving some. So I need to restart my server. So I'm going to close once again because it's asking for restarting of my server. So I'm stopping my Glassfish server. I'm trying to reopen once again my NetBeans, because as it is a built-in, I can't go for only stopping of that one. So I'm stop enter application, and I'm trying to reopening once again to start your server. I told is a sessions, or it may be cookies can be taken place. So this is your request dispatcher. So opening once again the requested files what you had, and try to clean and build. I made it clean and build. So build to be success. Yes, it has been done. So we'll check it out. Is there still any problem? So your server started. One more. Something is wrong. So servlet program dispatcher module has not been displayed. So when you try to open this file, so whenever you are having a program, just try to click this one. So maybe servlet program dispatcher ND project build file, you are getting some error here. So deployment has not been done properly. So maybe some of the problems here we are going to get. Fine. So we'll just check it out. If not, I'll show the output later, don't worry. But just try to get it the concept. So there is no errors in this. Maybe we are facing error with your server only. I'll try to make the change of your server. Maybe that maybe work out for your, just give me a second. So it's giving server issue. Servlet programs dispatched build NB project. So maybe some of the issues we are raising over your server. I'll try to just check it out. So as you are having a this program as previously it is executed properly, but only the problem now I'm getting server log details entered wrong. Fine, no problem. Just I will try to show this one later. So tomorrow we'll just make it. Maybe some errors. So it needs to some time to rectify my error. Fine. So it is not deployed the server log files. Maybe it's problem with your server. There is no issues with my program. Program is fine because it's already executed previously. So we'll just check it out, the program. And if you want to just make it run in your system by sharing this program with you so that you can go ahead. So we'll just try to rectify the problem once again while in the next session. So this is what something about your request dispatcher methods and type of methods, what you call forward as well as your include methods, right? So this is what the basic things what we are doing, and anyone can make. Okay, fine. After discussing, this is an example where I need to execute actually. So when I try to enter my user ID and password over here and click my login button, so automatically it's validate your user ID password entered is right or wrong. What that process is called as a validation process, and if it is right, it's going to make a forward method that only I included in my code, right? So I'm making a forward to move to next servlet. And what is the next servlet? Is a welcome servlet.java, so that it can be print a message as welcome as the name of your servlet, or welcome so and so. It is going to give a message. If suppose the user ID and password you entered wrong, it goes validation wrong, then it comes back to my include method, and it is going to include once again your HTML file, that is your login.html, asking for re-entry. So this is what I can say include method. Now, after this include and forward, we had one more concept which you call as, this is what I am doing, the different type of files we created. Actually, I tried from this only. So include index.html, login.html, welcome, and then XML deployment descriptor. Now, coming to next one. This is somewhat interlinked with your previous two methods. What is this method actually? It is a send redirect method. So anyone can say, what do you mean? So before going to send redirect, here one point is highlighted. So the second point, what I'm just making here is, it accepts relative as well as absolute URLs. But what do you mean by exactly relative URL means what, and absolute URLs means what? Anyone can just make it in the chat box, or those who are physically present, you can just give me the answer. What do you mean by absolute URL, and what do you mean by relative URL? With example I need. Anyone can respond? Yeah, here I got answer from Matthews. Absolute is full path. Okay. Absolute means it's a full path. Okay. What do you mean by relative? How?
one URL link into another URL.
Okay. So one URL is another URL. Okay, fine. So I said to with an example. So relative is only the file name. So it's a reference name, I can say. We are using a tag called href. What is it? Href represents. So hyperlink we are going to make and not giving exactly the path where we need to redirect. If you redirection is happening with the help of full web address with a supported protocol, as I need to define like this. If it's supporting of your protocol and with full URL address, as you mentioned, example, you take www.marwaduniversity.ac.in. Is it absolute or relative? It's an absolute. But if you take a relative, as you say, when you use your do get method or do post method, something your href links will be created, reference links. So it is not giving a complete path for us. So if you don't have any complete path, but redirection should be taken place, that type of URL is known as what? Relative URL. Means either it is depends on protocol or not, we don't know. Maybe it may depends, but we cannot able to see. So that type of URL is called relative URL. Matthews, you have given right. And similarly, when you just made it here as a send a redirect method, this is what happening as daily we can see when you try to access any URL address, where you are going to enter your URL address. You are going to enter in your URL bar some address you are going to type and just enter the button, so it can be redirected to somewhere where the address part you have mentioned, right? So same thing I'm making here. So send redirect is also be a method using the help of interface. Which interface it is going to get here? Response interface, because redirection is going to be taken place there. So I need to get HTTP solid response interface, and that can be used to redirect response from one resource to another resource. So that resource can be, once again, anything, right? And this send redirect is working for both URLs, as I mentioned, relative or it can be absolute. Both can be work over here, no problem. And here, this will work only or when you try to enter some URL address at the client side. Why I'm stressing this point here is when you go for a comparison between your forward method and send redirect, is one of the difference where we can find in my send redirect, it works at client side because we need to enter or we need to use URL where in the web browser, which is located in the web client machine, and to make another request. So once the request has been made, it can be moved inside the server or it can be outside the server. As the difference come, I will ask the question. So at that time, you need to give the differences between your forward and redirect, because both are doing the same thing, but with some minor modifications, or I can say some of the difference I can found it. All right. So what is the thing I'm saying? Please make it granted this point is make is underline. It works at wait machine, at client machine, and once you enter your URL address on your web client browser, it can be redirected. So it can be redirected and it's moves to inside and outside the server, right? To use this send redirect, as I told, we are using a method. What is the method we are using? Send redirect method, and this is a syntax as we need to follow. Public return type and send redirect, and in the bracket or in the parenthesis, what we need to maintain? The address where we need to redirect, that address we need to manage in the parenthesis which we had, and that if any exception has been done, that can be thrown by IO exception. And this is one of the example what I can say, response dot send a redirect, and it's going to redirect it to what? Clearly I have given absolute address here, protocol help. This is my absolute address. So I mentioned, and it has been redirected to go back to the address or URL which you maintain your client machine. So same thing if you try to implement with an example, just we can find this as example of your what? Redirect. So there are two servlets as we had. One second. One is my login servlet one is welcome servlet. Previously, what we have taken, try to modify the same thing here. So this is what you all know. No need to explain this all things, packages and etc. So up to this, you had an idea because it is a common code which we are generating still up to this one. So where we need to get it just is important. I will just highlight there only. So we are getting a parameter of user ID and password, same using your method called request.getParameter. And here also we are checking either your entered user ID and password is right or wrong. Suppose if user ID and password is right, so what I am just making here, one second, you can find our method, previous method, request dispatcher include. I made it here. Then if suppose that has been user ID and password you are entered is equals to this J is your user ID and password is 1234. If it is matches, then you are going to redirect it to welcome servlet. This is your second servlet we are redirecting. So what is the first servlet? Java, login.java is my first servlet. So in my login.java, I clearly saying that if my user ID and password is done rightly, then I'm redirecting to my second servlet. If goes wrong, then I'm giving a message. Then I'm going to dispatch to where? One second, my URL to login.html because validation field there. Then I'm going to include my 1 second request and response. This is what the method where we are using our send redirect method. But what this welcome.java containing? Simply a welcoming message that you have entered so and so rightly. So I just make it as you granted to open my second servlet. So it has been redirected to second servlet to open your servlet to call as what? Welcome to dot or welcome servlet dot java. So this is a deployment descriptor where I can use. So no need to explain every time deployment descriptor because it contains only servlet name and servlet class name and URL address pattern where you are going to be redirected. So that is an example which shows about the method we called as what? Send redirect. So this is a very, very important thing what I can say as every day we are using this method as a send redirect, but how we are getting, we need to have a clarity. So for this session, what we just discussed roughly, I'm coming back once again. Attributes we have discussed, how we are using in attributes, what are the methods we have, get, set, remove, init param, these are 4 methods we had. And later, we have discussed about your request dispatcher. What do you mean by request dispatcher? And what are the methods including your request dispatcher? There are 2 methods. What is the 2 methods? One is forward method and one more is include method. The forward method is going to be redirected to the next servlet once you have make a request of your resource 1 to resource 2 without recording the response of one servlet. And in your include method, request has been forwarded as usual, but you are getting a response back from your second servlet to record your overall response, and it is integratedly sent to your client machine. That is what the second method. And third method is called send redirect method. It's same as looking like forward only, but it has somewhat differences. Now it is time to give the differences between what is the differences we can find between your forward and send redirect. Anyone can just give the answer to my questions. I told already when I'm saying these 2 methods, be careful. What will be the difference between your forward and your what method? The send redirect method. At least one. I highlighted some points. Yes. Yeah, Matthew, you are following right. So I make it as point granted. You have same answer you have given. Very good. Send redirect works at client side. Exactly. Right. Whereas your forward method will work over your server. Right. Any other difference you had it? Any other difference? Come on. Anyone? No? That's why I'm at the time of giving the content, I said, please be clear about this concept, because as we need to discuss once again, the differences point will come. We need to have a clarity. Only Matthew is responding. What about others? 28 members are there. No one is responding. Okay, fine. So if you see this, the differences, so totally we had 4 differences. One difference already given by Matthew. So it works what? At the client server, because as you need to enter your URL address at your client machine. So that is the reason. So I'll come to my first point. The forward methods works at what side? Server side, right? But whereas your son methods works at client side. Okay, it's I'm not sharing. Just give me a second. Thank you. Yes, there you can find. So first one, as already given, the forward method works at server side, and your send redirect method will works at what side? Client side. And coming into my second difference, this is very, very important. As you know, when you take your send redirect method, every time when you go for send redirect method is called, new request has been created. But whereas your forward method, the new request will not be considered. The request which is already loaded by your servlet 1, or maybe login servlet, or maybe some XYZ servlet, that request and response will carry forward. I told I have taken as a line of code also there. What I made it? Context dot forward request comma response. I have mentioned in a parenthesis. What it means? Same request, same response is carried, or it can be forwarded to the next servlet which we are redirecting or forwarding. So that is what I just make it as a second. It sends the same request and same object, response objects, to another servlet. But whereas your send redirect will not do like this. Every time it loads a new request. Next, coming into my third, send redirect is maybe within the server, maybe outside the server. I also told this point. Please be clear with this point. So it can work inside the server or outside the server. There is no restriction that it should only work within that particular server, because your redirection can be done anywhere. Not maybe Google server, not maybe Yahoo server. It can be redirected to anywhere. So it can be used within and outside of your server, but whereas your forward method is limited or restricted to use only that particular server, because you clearly made your application server at that time run, so it can be loaded to that particular application. So coming into my second, last and final, as you just check it out, your response dot send redirect, which is a syntax I'm using. Just what is the difference you can find between these two ways? Here, when I'm using my forward, right? When I'm using my forward, I am going to take the help of which method called get request dispatcher, and your servlet name, and request and response, which is your forwarding of your previous servlet has been loaded and that has been forwarded. But whereas coming to your send redirect, I don't require these things. Simply I can call response dot send redirect. Immediately it redirected to which one? To servlet 2. Like this. So we can find some of the basic differences between your forward and send direct, because both are used for same purpose, but with some minute differences we had it, right? So this is about your the concept called send redirect concept. As next session, we are going to focusing on more on filters. This is also a very important topic as a filter, right? Because if I start, it takes some time to complete, because it's a lengthy topic as a filter package, and the disadvantages, and what are the interfaces we had, and just everything we need to discuss. So maximum we'll may cover in this next session. How to configure also we had with an example. So we are going to see the demo also, how to configure your filter, how we are doing for deployment descriptor, and later we need to go your session tracking and cookies. That also we can see. Maximum we'll try Any doubts? So I think yeah. Any clarifications, any doubts, please, you can post in the chat box. Shubham, actually, I just not presented. Later, I made a share. I think you can edit that one. If any doubts you can have, you can post in the chat box. Dear students, with these 4 methods, that is forward, include, and send, redirect, and attributes your servlets. Any doubts you had? Please be respond fastly. Any doubts? If no doubts, can post your attendance in the chat box. I can leave. Mr. Ahmed, why you are giving 2 numbers? Oh, okay, fine. Sorry. I thought from that one only. Yeah, you can leave the meeting. Because in the last yeah, those who are posted, you can leave the meeting. Yeah, you can just go. More 3 students are there. Please post your attendance and you can leave the session fastly.
Sir. Hello, sir. Hello. Sir. Sir, can you hear me? Hello. Hello, sir. Hello.
Yeah, Hamid, you can leave.
Sir, did you get my
Hamad,
number?
sorry.
Just now I wrote my number. I have written my number just now. Because I went out and came back. I don't have connection. Did you get it now?